So our speaker today is Felicia Dodge. She is a Bentley grad. She majored in marketing and minored in CIS. She's now working at Twitter as a researcher, trying to figure out how audience insights from tweets can improve business process. And especially with, she's worked with fast food restaurants and other companies you probably recognize. And we are so thrilled to welcome you back.
Thank you. That was a great intro. I put a couple slides together just to kind of guide the discussion, but I'm hoping we can make it really interactive and you guys can jump in with questions or anything like that as I go along. And so I just put together a quick intro of myself. You covered it really well, but I'll just reiterate a couple things. A quick intro to Twitter and how we work specifically in the tech space. And then I have a little exercise of relevant to what I do, which is create insights. So I'm going to walk through the process of data versus an insight and how to bring one to another. And then I just have a couple notes on career paths that I've noticed within Twitter, some of the skill sets that I've kind of talked to people about and which ones are relevant to which parts of tech. And then if anyone has any questions, I save time at the end. Again, we can make it really conversational. So this is just a little bit about me. My current role at Twitter is I lead the audience insights for the entertainment and alcohol dining industries. So from things like movies and television to McDonald's, fast food, and new alcohol flavors. Those are all the things that I work on. My team is a small team. And so for that reason, we are kind of specialized into these vertical areas. And my Twitter handle is @Felicia Dodge. If you want to follow me or anything like that, I encourage everyone to use Twitter as both an educational and a networking tool. Just in general, pro tip, I found that it's really helpful for college students and new grads, especially just to meet people in the field, see what kind of overlaid interests that you have with some of these people and make good connections. And again, I graduated from Bentley in 2017, so not too long ago. I majored in marketing with a CIS minor. Within CIS, I wasn't planning on doing a minor when I first went to Bentley. I just wanted to take like a intro to SQL class and I ended up really loving it. And then I took like the other SQL class and then I said, okay, I'm gonna just make a minor because this is a really cool topic. So kind of like you, Sarah, except I didn't actually switch my major. I just decided that I wanted to continue my education in like a data focused field, but still keep some of the marketing and business skills that I picked up from having that as a major. And just a little bit about me generally, I love tech in general. Tech companies have always been the top of my interest in terms of fields I wanted to get into. I think it's just so interesting how everything's always changing. And it's a space where you can really be innovative, try new ideas, and that really excited me. When I got my first full-time job, or even actually as I was at Bentley, I was interning at a very small startup for 4 to 5 years. It was a team of 5 people, so a lot of really fun experiences just being in the startup tech space. Obviously, Twitter is not a startup. Twitter is a big established company. This is a quote from the website. Twitter is an open service that's home to a world of diverse people, perspectives, ideas, and information. Over the past year or so, I feel like the purpose of Twitter and how it's been used has even spread beyond this. People using Twitter as like their main source of news to get updates on what's going on. Right now, I'm following this Twitter account called NYC COVID vaccine that gives me a notification every time new appointments open up. So just so many things that Twitter can be used for from that are more than just, following your favorite celebrities. And I broke Twitter's purpose and who we serve into these 2 main groups. Obviously, there's way more than this. We serve our stakeholders, we serve our employees, we serve all those things that we learned about at Bentley of, when you have a company, who do you serve? But for the purpose of explaining kind of like my group at Twitter, I wanted to separate between consumers and customers. So consumers from Twitter perspective are people like us, kind of, we have our own Twitter accounts, we're in the platform, we follow our friends, we follow celebrities. We're the people who use Twitter. And then we also have Twitter's customers. So where our actual revenue comes from, the brands that are advertising on Twitter, those are who we serve as our customers. So just distinguishing those two groups and how we have different teams that kind of support each of those. I highlighted some of the tech teams that I know Twitter has. There's way more than this, but just for this audience, I highlighted data science, software engineering, design and research, product management, just to give some example of kind of the range of opportunities that there are. And outside of this, obviously, we have people that work in all functions across the entire organization, from marketing to HR to just general management, and all of those things. But I'll come back to this later on in the presentation. What I do is at this kind of unique intersection of research and analytics, business, marketing, and strategy. So the research and analytics, that's where kind of the CS application comes in. Business and marketing, so general, just how do businesses work, knowing how decisions are made. A lot of that experience that I got at Bentley overall was really helpful to have to combine with that technical stuff. And then finally, kind of similar to that in terms of strategy. So a little bit marketing focused, but also just general. At the end of the day, we're trying to increase revenue. So how do we do that? How do we be creative in everything that we do in a way that serves the general public, the people that use Twitter, but also our customers? So that was a lot. I went through it kind of fast, but I just wanted to highlight this. When I was going into a career, I didn't really realize that there was an intersection like this that existed. In my head, I was like, the options are to either be a really technical person or to be a non-technical person. But in reality, there are so many career paths that actually blend those. So if you wanted to be 50% technical and 50% non-technical, there's a career path for that. If you want tech to be your main focus, but you still want to interact with people, you don't want to be coding all day long, then there's a career path for that. Or the opposite, if you want to code all day long, you don't want to talk to people, then there's still a career path for that too. So this is where I sit, but there's a lot of other kind of like different overlaps with these different skills that could potentially be a future career for any of you. Okay, so now kind of going through a made up example that I have of taking data and building it into an insight. So what I do in my team's the audience insights team. We work with the sales team at Twitter. So the sales team is going out and trying to get brands to advertise on Twitter. And I help the sales team come up with opportunities and unique messaging opportunities or strategy to recommend to brands that say either why they should advertise on Twitter, what type of audience they should focus on when they do advertise, and any other implications that should be considered, all based in data. So my main source of kind of like where I am working every day is primarily in SQL, figuring out within this massive data set that Twitter sits on, which are tweets. There is a big business in figuring out the themes and the conversations and the audiences that are showing up on Twitter. And it's really quite easy to look at those at a macro level and kind of decipher what that means for a specific brand. So every day I'm like working on how to get unique data points by writing new queries, elevating existing ones, working across different teams to figure out where the data is and things like that. But I'm going to walk through an example of, let's pretend that I'm doing like an actual example with my entertainment team. And I came up with I found these few data points based on just my queries that I ran. And so a couple examples, some of them are real, some of them are made up, but I'm not going to say which ones are which just for privacy purposes. But one data point is there are 18 million tweets about movies so far this year. Another one would be that 40% of the people talking about movies on Twitter are are aged 18 to 34. Another data point, the audience talking about movies tweets about the topic on average 3 times a year. And the number one tweeted about movie by 18 to 13-year-olds, 18 to 34-year-olds this year is Zack Snyder's Justice League. So as a whole, these are data points. They're not super insightful. They just kind of state facts of like what I observed from the data that I found. So just kind of going through the stage of what I would do to make this more impactful. The first thing is to add context. So I added in bold. Now it becomes kind of a more powerful message here. So instead of just stating how many tweets about movies there are, I'm saying this is a 35% growth in conversation versus previous period. So right away, you can contextualize that number. 40% of the audience is talking about it, but I need to isolate how that compares to maybe the average Twitter user. Is 40% a normal percent for people to be talking about movies, or is it more so than the average person would be talking about it? And then the third one, contextualizing when or how conversation is happening. So we know maybe people are tweeting about movies a certain number of times a year, but maybe they're talking about, maybe most of the time that they're talking about it, it's right after a trailer drops. So how can we kind of add that additional layer? And then lastly, identifying that the audience in general tends to tweet more about action and adventure films more than the average Twitter user. So having the one data point of Justice League being the top movie might not be as insightful as maybe contextualizing it as part of this audience's broader interests. And so now, okay, it's starting to grow a little. And just a warning, there's a lot of words on the next slide. I would never put this many words, even this slide has too many words. I would never put this many words on an actual client presentation, but I wanted to keep the previous step within it. So on the right, ignore that. But from that, what is the insight? So from those kind of contextualized data points, it now becomes, okay, the conversation about movies on Twitter is accelerating. We identified the growth, it's accelerating. And the reason is because people are starting to look forward to the return to theaters and the long awaited release of their favorite films. A lot of things got put on pause. Production was paused for a lot of movies and television series with COVID regulations. So we know that this is something that people are looking forward to. They're excited and all that stuff. A lot of those younger millennials, maybe older Gen Z, Centennials, are driving the conversation. They're inspired by the new trailer drops. And when they see their favorite actors or long-awaited action films on the big screen, they're going to be really looking forward to that moment. So we're kind of seeing how it started with like 18 million tweets about movies, and now it's become this sort of broad explanation of how a movie theater company or even a movie studio that's actually creating the movie would use this information. So taking it a next step further, I think this is the last step. What is our tactical recommendation? What are we gonna tell our partner here? And we might say something that, again, this is kind of made up, but we might say something like, when targeting the younger demographic on Twitter, film studios should focus on large moments like trailer drops. The messaging for these advertisements should be focused on the excitement to see the movie in theaters. Actually, I lied. There's one more step that I outlined here that we would recommend kind of, and this is specifically for a film studio, but we might make a totally different interpretation and recommendation for a streaming service. Actually, we definitely would, because right now there's a battle between these movies coming out in theaters, but also being released on streaming services at the same time. And this just happened a couple weeks ago with the Godzilla vs. Kong release that was released on HBO Max, but also in theaters. So now the movie landscape is changing in general. So the strategy is going to be different for the type of entertainment client. And so that's just another part of my job, is just knowing the different industry implications for these different types of companies. And so the idea, kind of tying back to Twitter's advertising, And this is something that my team would work with our creative strategy team to sort of build out is, okay, we know all this information. Let's build out a Twitter takeover product. So that's Twitter's most expensive advertising product where you can kind of take over the platform. I'm sure if you are a Twitter user, you've seen when you go to the explore page and there's a big video front and center, and you see the little promoted icon underneath there. That's usually a takeover. And so that captures the user's attention right away, almost replicating the experience that you might have in the actual theater. So that's something that it could tie into that insight of how do we create this movie theater experience, but virtually. And maybe there's an in-person element too, where we say, if you tweet this certain hashtag, then you could win a chance to rent out a movie theater on your own with yourself and 15 guests. That's just an example. But these are the kind of things that we think about. And just going back, this all started with like the number of tweets about movies. And obviously, there were a lot of steps that went into going from that to the actual insight to the recommendation. So that's kind of what me and my team do every day. Might not be as I think it's interesting, but I know it isn't everyone's cup of tea. So I kind of outlined some other career paths that are available in tech, specifically from what I've seen at Twitter and teams that I've worked with and collaborated with. So going into this, so going back to these tech teams, at first when I was going into tech, I knew the first thing I knew was that I wanted to be in tech. I didn't really care what part of tech it was. I was like, I could do product management, I could do design and research, maybe data science even. In reality, there's so many different opportunities to get into any of these fields. But from what I heard some of you say before, a lot of you are kind of interested in both just marketing in general, maybe with like technology implications, which is interesting too. So I outlined some of these skill sets that might kind of mirror to each of these career paths. So in my field, research and analytics, as I said before, SQL is my number one technical skill that I'm using all day, every day. I'm actually one of the only people on my team that started at Twitter knowing SQL. So I thank Bentley for that, for teaching me SQL. A lot of people don't actually know it when they first start, and we just kind of teach them on the job, which it all is possible, but it definitely gives a little bit of an edge to at least have an introduction to it, let alone having like advanced experience in it is like beyond incredible. In addition to that, storytelling, data translating. So that whole exercise of data to insight is all about like taking data to the next level. Strategy, communication. A lot of my job is actually presenting these sometimes complex insights to clients and knowing how to explain a advanced technical concept in a way that kind of translates to just normal layman's terms is a really important skill to have. For product management, I realized that a lot of skills that are important in product management are similar to analytics in that you have to have analytical skills and you have to know how to have that technical speak and communication, because essentially a product manager is the middleman between, I hate to say middleman, middle person between the engineering teams and the business teams. So the business teams are saying, this is what we need, or this is a problem that we've identified in the product. And it's kind of the product manager's job to translate and problem solve into how that could become a technical concept. And then speaking with the engineering teams to say, how can we actually make this a reality and build this out? Then the engineering team would kind of code. So that's the product management skill set, expertise, and then data science. Advanced Python or R is a must. In addition to that, advanced statistics. I know the one person who said they're interested in the data analytics major. I wish they had that when I was there. That would have been really cool, kind of complementary to CIS, just to kind of bring that experience full circle of the really advanced kind of analytical skills and statistical predictions and all of that stuff is really important. Again, communication. And then lastly, for engineering, like I said in the product management example, a lot of this is programming based, coding based, SQL, scripting. So how to automate code and excuse me, create programs that kind of run on their own and being efficient with all of those things. I took one object-oriented programming class at Bentley, and I'm trying to remember who taught it, but it was really helpful to get like an introduction to that, to realize that I didn't want to do engineering. So also a side tip of, if you take a class and maybe it's not your favorite, it's still good to kind of identify maybe things that you're not as interested in. I heard a beep. Was that someone writing a comment?
No, somebody just joined the call.
Oh, okay, cool. But I guess that's a good place to kind of pause. I feel like I've been talking a lot, but anyone on the call have any thoughts or specifically like questions, I guess, about what I've said so far?
Yeah, I can ask a question. So I was just wondering how you feel Bentley's prepared you for like the market research part of your work. Like, I know right now in like my marketing classes we're using Qualtrics and like SPSS, and I'm not sure if you like use those platforms like in the real world, or if like the skills that you've learned at Bentley were transferable to help you pick up on what you're working with now, or if you can just like speak on that.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely marketing research was a good class, if it's still called that, I think it is, of, and also marketing management as well. Those two were definitely helpful. A lot of what I do is survey based as well. So the example I talked about here was mining the large data set of tweets that we have, but another whole part is obviously not everything can be answered through tweets. Most things can, but not everything can. Sometimes we want to ask specific questions to people. And so that's where a survey is a really good tool to get that information. And so we usually we work with a vendor to run surveys, and they kind of do the analysis for us, which isn't the case for every company. But I know sometimes, and with other companies, I know Apple is like this as well. They're very like, they don't trust anyone to analyze their survey responses for them, so they do it all in-house. So it kind of depends on what company it is, but I know that SPSS is used in the real world. I can confirm that. I don't use it, but I know that it is used, if that helps. That's a good question. Sorry, Mark, you're gonna say something?
You also went on to get your master's afterward.
I did.
And I wonder if you could talk about while I let somebody in, just the difference between your undergrad experience and your grad experience, and how each shaped your career ideas separately.
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't bring that up at first. I didn't know if it was kosher to bring up my non-Bentley experience, but I'm happy to talk about it. So after I graduated from Bentley, I actually graduated a year early because at that time I was either debating, I was like, do I switch my major to CIS and stay a full year, or do I graduate early and just get an advanced degree in this very targeted field of analytics that I was interested in? So I eventually decided to do the latter. And so I attended Columbia University, their master's in applied analytics program. So I started that right after my 3 years at Bentley. And the reason I chose that program is because it was, at the time, it was one of the only kind of advanced analytics programs that master's programs that exist, where that's actually focused on the analytics part and not just broad business or data science, but actually kind of that overlap between business and technical. And in the program, some of the things, just to highlight the things that I thought were most valuable that I learned in that experience, are storytelling with data. So that whole exercise, I think, is all based in that knowledge of data storytelling, which I almost think is like a new flash term that people get. It gets thrown around a lot of like, oh, storytelling with data, how to make data more interesting. But it really is.
We've proposed a course like that at Bentley, and it should be offered for the next year or so. And it was offered as a pilot, and it's going to become a standard course as part of the data series and minors for minors as well.
That's super exciting. Wow. Okay. I can't speak highly enough about that as a course or a subject. So if that does happen, let me know. I'm happy to do anything I can to help.
We'll have you come speak to them too.
Yeah.
The other question I want to ask you is, you got a job at Twitter. How hard is it to get, were they hiring? Did they find you? Did you find them? Did you apply? What was the interview like? Did you blow them away? Obviously you did. How do you get a job at Twitter?
Great question. So I have always wanted to work in technology, and kind of starting like when I started at Bentley, I knew that that was something I wanted to do. And I've always had my heart set on a company like Twitter. So I am kind of a little bit crazy in that I was like 20 or something, and not even 20, I was 18, and I was reaching out to Twitter, like trying to get in there. I did a lot of like cold reaching out, LinkedIn. I attended, they had like a summer event. One summer I went after my freshman year of like careers at Twitter. And I just met a bunch of people there in person. It was like any student could go. I met a bunch of people there. And then I applied to, this is kind of a funny story, but after I graduated Bentley, I applied to Twitter and I said, if I get this job at Twitter, I won't go to grad school. I don't need it. I'll just go right to Twitter. And then I didn't get the job at Twitter. And so I went to grad school, and then I applied to Twitter again when I graduated grad school, and I got rejected again. And then I started working at a smaller tech company called Quantifine. It was in the data science software as a service space. And I worked there for just about a year when someone from Twitter reached out to me, who I met at that original Twitter summer event my freshman year, and was like, I saw this position that we're hiring for. Would you be interested in it? And then it was kind of right from there. I had an interview scheduled like that afternoon for the position, and I was hired in maybe like 2 weeks. It was super fast because at the time I was joining a brand new team. So they were just trying to get heads in the door. And I was lucky to be like one of those first people in. In general, I found that big companies, obviously, I know Bentley, the big fours, competitive. A lot of the big tech companies are competitive. The big finance and banks are competitive. All the companies are competitive in their own way. But what really helped me is just trying to make those connections early on and just expressing my deep interest in the company and what they stand for and all of that stuff.
So raise your hand if you think you might want to work at Twitter someday. Okay, make sure you connect with Felicia and start making those connections.
Yeah.
It's a great place to start. That's who has the next question? Umberto, you turned your camera on. What are you going to say?
No, I don't really have a question right now, but
Then tell us something that you learned from Felicia's talk that you either hadn't thought about or you thought was really cool.
something I really thought was really interesting was the research and analytics skill set, and like how a lot of it's storytelling, and I found that really interesting, and like just trying to discover like what like field or career field there is, and how there's not just like, you're not one side where you're just like communicative or just tech. It's like there's combinations, and I find that really interesting.
Awesome.
Thank you.
That actually reminded me, I have one more slide that I forgot.
Okay.
And it's just two headlines of why communication skills are so important in anything in the IT industry. So that kind of reminds me of that, of like, this is, even if you're like the most technical person, you have to know how to communicate your technical concepts. Otherwise, it doesn't mean too much. And it's just a great skill to have to get ahead in general. So I put in these headlines just to reiterate that, but that goes back to the whole storytelling thing as well, of being an important aspect.
So what I hear you saying is that in addition to your technology skills, you need to be able to explain what you're doing really well, both from a consumer point of view and from a tech point of view to customers who may not have the same background as you, so they sort of get it.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you recommend the people whose screens are off and the people whose screens are on do in order to develop their technology skills while they're in school? Are there things that they could, classes they should take, jobs they might want to look for on campus that would give them those opportunities? Stuff like that. Clubs,
Yeah.
organizations.
I think that communication is interesting because maybe 10 years ago, communication was all about writing and how good can you write an email and things like that. But now it's just evolved to be all different facets of communication. So writing is still a good one. I think it's just a really important skill when you are trying to get your point across, being clear and concise. So writing for like the newspaper or writing your own kind of blog if there's a topic that you're interested in. I'm trying to think of other organizations that are focused in that. I am going to add a plug for the service learning organization at Bentley specifically, because I started working in the service learning center my like first day freshman year, and it felt like almost I was like starting a career of like, I learned how to balance priorities and work with different types of people and organize. As a program manager, you like organize different schedules and you meet with community managers, and it's just a great opportunity to feel like you're in a business environment. A lot of like problem solving that comes up, and you're trusted to be a leader in what you're organizing. So I think it was definitely transferable for me and for any career really that you go into. So 10 out of 10 would recommend either doing that as like a credit option or becoming a leader in that, or really any organization is a good step to take. So
Thanks.
someone has a question.
Patrick, your hands up.
So what was the, like, once you were denied the first, and I guess second time, don't mean to rub salt in the wound, but you're there now, so it's not a big deal. But what was it like getting back up after that? Because I know that like for some of us right now, we're battling our own, I guess, weird battles in terms of not being able to do certain things, and it's having a pretty large effect. And I feel like while the effect that not getting the job, what I feel like the effect was larger for you than it is for us right now. How do you suggest like getting back up after that, like just brushing it off and keeping going?
That's a great question. And I feel for all of you who are in college right now. My sister is also a junior in college, and I see firsthand like her. She's like, I can't get an internship. There's literally nothing. This is like terrible. So I feel for everyone going through that now. For me, I'm trying to remember. I have like a weird mindset of failure almost, where at the time I kind of positioned it to myself as like, well, maybe I wasn't really ready for this anyways. And I just convinced myself to keep going. So I almost use it to motivate me to like not give up on my dream of working at Twitter. And I have no hard feelings now, because I do realize looking back on it, of it definitely wasn't the right time. I definitely needed to get my master's to get that experience. And I definitely needed even that first job at the smaller startup to understand what I liked and didn't like about a tech career. So I have no regrets of like how things turned out. This is also probably cliche, but looking like when you are a few years from now, you might look back and say like, oh, well, I'm glad that I was able to kind of like work through that really difficult time because it made you stronger or more resilient or hardworking or whatever it did. I think that some of these things are maybe thrown at us for a reason. So that's again just like an inspirational thing, but hope it
Right.
helps.
I had one last question.
Yeah.
In terms of, so you said that the interview was that same day, correct?
Yeah.
So did you train, I guess, or like practice for that with Bentley? Or was that something that you did kind of partially on your own, or was there anything that you feel helped the most?
So for interview skills specifically.
Yeah, because Twitter's, I feel, a pretty daunting interview to have. And feel for I guess anyone who would want to go to do something big like that, I think it'd be good to have that skill, even for smaller companies too.
Yeah. So when I was at Bentley, I was a terrible interviewer. I was so bad. And a speaker too. I was shy and awkward, and I did the whole like thing a lot, kind of just like all around really bad. But I I did do a lot of the stuff that Bentley offered. Mock interviews, I did a bunch. But I think what really helped me most was just time. And the more interviews I had, the more practice I had, the better interviewer I became. And one of the things I did for interviews and for just presentations as well is this is probably daunting, but I started recording myself speaking. So if I had like a virtual assignment of presenting something, I would record it and watch it over. And it was so cringy to look back on. Like it's so cringy to watch yourself, but I would take really detailed notes to myself and say, you are not looking at the camera. You need to look at the camera. You should pause more when you are like talking so that you're not talking on and on and on. And I probably still have so many things to work on. And maybe I can watch this recording after and critique myself. But things like that really helped me just become a better interviewer. And also work experience in general, I feel like helped because, and that's why I say too, I'm glad I started at a company that wasn't Twitter, because I had a big learning curve and made a lot of mistakes. I would have hated to done that at Twitter, but now I use like my startup company to make those mistakes of, coming to a client meeting and like not knowing how to answer a question and freezing. That has happened to me many times, but not so much anymore. So just having those awkward situations and figuring out how to work through them definitely helped.
Did you have internships like freshman, sophomore, junior year?
So after freshman year, yeah. So I think I had 3 internships. So one after freshman year, one after sophomore year, and one after junior year. Wait, no, because I only had 3 summers because I graduated early. But I was very into the whole internship thing early on, which I just would recommend for anyone. I did the London internship program. I don't know if that still is a thing, but that was a really fun program. As a side note, of like we went to London for the summer and interned, and it was really fun. And then I worked at Liberty Mutual for one summer, which they also have a really great program. And I started working at a startup as well during the school year as another internship.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I want to point out for those of you who are not sure what you're doing this summer, you're talking about internships, that if you don't get a paid internship, one of the things that Bentley's doing again this year is they're offering volunteer internships with some faculty members. who have identified specific projects that they're looking for students who might want to volunteer to help with, purely for the experience. And it's a flexible thing. It could be 5 hours a week or 10 hours a week, depending on your availability. And you'd work with a faculty member for a while. I know that the proposals that we had to submit for those are due, I think, today or tomorrow. So keep your eye out for those opportunities if you don't have a paid opportunity, because at least you'll be able to work with somebody and get something that you can put on your resume that you had a relevant experience during the summer, as opposed to a blank line for what you did during the summer. So even if you end up getting a non even if you end up getting a job that may not be in line with what your career goals are, you might be able to get a part-time opportunity that you can add to your experience list. So watch out for those. That announcement should come, I guess, for the next couple of weeks from the university career services, I believe.
That's so awesome that Bentley's doing that.
Yeah, it started last year as part of the pandemic. I had a couple of students working with me last summer. They were great. I ended up hiring one of them to work in the sandbox this year. Actually, two of them, because they did some great work during the summer. And so I encourage some of you who are looking for those opportunities to keep that in mind if it turns out that you might need one, to give you that experience.
And another,
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say another thing for maybe some of the juniors in the room, or I don't think there were any seniors, but if you are interested in a certain area, building a website or a portfolio just for your projects and stuff, that was something that helped me start my career. They said that they looked at every job that I've had, said that they looked at my website, which didn't expect anyone to do that. So just a fun way to stand out in that, even if it's something like the project you're working on with a faculty member. I can't get over how cool that is that Bentley's doing that, but I'm not surprised. Bentley always does good stuff for their students.
Can you paste your LinkedIn into the chat while I think of it? And can I show them your website?
Sure.
Okay, would you stop sharing so I can share?
Yeah.
All right. Because I also looked at Felicia's website before she got here, and you'll see it's a great introduction to who she is. She used Wix.com to create this, so you can see that, and that's great. She's got her resume up here, and also a thumbnail version of her experience in a very friendly and inviting way. You can really get a good sense of the kinds of things that she does, and that she does it with enthusiasm. So, and the other thing to notice is she has her domain name as her name. So if you haven't yet bought your name, that's a good reason to do it, because it makes it easy to find. It makes you easy to find when people are looking for you. Nice job on this. I should point out, we had a speaker once before who said, we were talking about social media and social networking for jobs, and they said, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And I think that's really important to make if you want to put yourself out there, then do it in a way that will get you found. And having even a short website describing your professional interest is a great thing to do. And yours is a wonderful example of that. So thanks.
Thank you. I was not prepared for that live demo.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just pasted in my LinkedIn.
Great, thank you for that. Hannah, you turned your camera on earlier. I didn't know if you had a comment to make.
I was just gonna say that I think it was really inspiring and interesting that in getting your dream job, I guess you had different setbacks and it wasn't necessarily the most attainable right away, but you kept with it. And it's kind of inspiring to hear that even if you do, your first try doesn't go well, like you can still be successful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, most people, your first job or even maybe second job isn't a dream job. And I'm telling this to my sister now too, because she's like, well, I want to get my dream job at 23 like you did. And I'm like, that's not, you know, it, your dream job could be something that you start when you're 40. It doesn't have to be this short term, like one and done kind of thing. So I love that.
Thank you. Any last questions before we stop for today? Any last closing remarks? Okay, then thank you so much for coming. If you can stick around for 1 second after we close the recording. And thank you everybody else for being here today as well. Our last Topics in Tech, as I mentioned, is next Wednesday at 2 o'clock when Philip Destel's from Tondo will be speaking. All of a sudden, you should see his flyer up on the screen. Philip is going to be talking about everything that's connected with the Internet of Things. And please join us to wrap up the summer and wrap up the season before the summer with his presentation next week. This presentation should be on the CIS Sandbox website at cissandbox.com under Topics in Tech, probably over the weekend. We'll get it up and posted so you can watch it again. And thank you all for coming and have a great afternoon.